Hello everybody and welcome to our Q&A today. My name is Alex Starr. I am joined today by the lovely Cheryl. We both are education advisors here at the Commonwealth Education Trust and Teach2030, and we are delighted to answer any of your questions today. If you've got any questions at all, do feel free to just pop them into the chat and we will try to answer anything that comes our way. We have had a couple of questions in already, so I'm going to let Cheryl explain the first question that we've had and answer it. I am going to answer for secondary students, and Cheryl is our primary expert today, so I will let her lead first from a primary perspective. Over to you, Cheryl.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, hello everybody. We have had a brilliant question to start us off today. And the question is, what are the meaningful characteristics of learning? And this is a fantastic question to actually start off with, because it really underpins everything that we do as teachers for our learners. And there are two aspects that I'd really like to talk about, which are active learning and also critical thinking. If we think about meaningful learning, these are the two things I'd like to focus on right now. So when we think of active learning, what does that actually mean in the classroom for the teacher and the student? We can think about it as motivation and engagement, and the opposite would be passive learning, which is not how we want our students to be learning at all. So if we think about active learning, one of the main things that we can do to promote active learning in the classroom is to actually set up chances for the students to explore and investigate, especially younger learners who really need a hands-on experience. That's how they will primarily learn, and that's primarily how they find their way in the world. So we need to give them chances to actually engage in open-ended activities, to actually try things out that they may make mistakes with, but that's okay. And we need to actually receive that positively in the learning environment and let them make those choices for themselves. So give them lots of choice, lots of resources to use, and let them engage in something where there isn't just only one answer at the end of the activity, where they can come up with multiple ideas. We need to also give them a chance to get really involved in their learning, and that takes time. So active learning means actually doing something. And we want to actually structure our lesson plan to actually give them that lovely period of time where they can be learning either with a partner or in a group, but with the teacher overseeing everything and actually taking their time to go around and see how the learning is going and checking what they're doing. But the children need to be having that chance to actually explore by themselves. And we need to plan for that as teachers. So we need to preempt this time and actually give them the chance to do that. And also, I would say that enjoyment is a really big factor of active learning. It's so easy to actually go to school, and I'm sure we can all remember times when we were stuck in lessons and we've gone through the whole lesson and we didn't smile, we didn't laugh, we didn't even remember what the lesson was all about. But it's up to us as teachers to facilitate this enjoyment and this love of learning in our students, which is ultimately what we would all want in our own schooling process as well. So the children it's really great for them to be able to tell you what they've enjoyed, how they've actually accomplished something, how they've gone about it, what kind of strategies they've used. And if they can echo all of this back to you and explain all of it, it means that you're doing a really, really good job of teaching them if they can actually tell you what they've learned and how they have learned it. So that's a little bit about active learning. If we think about critical thinking, that essentially in a nutshell is that we want our students to be able to think for themselves. What we don't want is children who are just parroting back what we have told them in a class. It's really important that they think for themselves, that they can explain things for themselves, and they can tell you a little bit about how they have learned something. And the two ways that we can actually promote critical thinking in the classroom as teachers is to allow a bit of independence. So allow our students to think for themselves, to value their contributions. It's really important that whatever ideas are shared in that classroom environment, we set up a safe space for those students and we actually value their contributions in the way that we feedback and the way that we receive their ideas, the way we respond. For younger learners, if they're not quite getting it, it's easy to actually say, no, you've got it wrong, or that's not correct. It's very, very easy to say that, but what we need to do is train ourselves to come up with some different phrases like, let's look at that again, or can you tell me how you did that, or let's go through these steps, let's check how we're doing here, and open up that learning, because the way that we receive their response can either open up the learning and keep the learning going, or it can really shut it down, which is not what we want to be able to do with them. So feedback is really, really important. And the other aspect of critical thinking would be problem solving, which is a huge part for younger learners and older learners. Really important to be able to test out theories, to test by trial and error, to think about what the ideas are and have a go at making up your own way of finding out. It's not always like a set way of doing things. Allow them to come up with different strategies and come together always at the end of a lesson. Have a summary, a conclusion in which you actually bring the learning together. You go through the strategies that you've actually all done. You could have had different strategies, different groups working in different ways, but discuss what worked, what didn't work, what the children liked, what was effective, what was not effective. But it's really important that you tie all of these together at the end of your lesson. So that's just a little bit about active learning and critical thinking in terms of the meaningful ways of learning.
That's brilliant, Cheryl. Thank you so much for that. I think it's everything you're saying. For those of you just joining us, Cheryl is our expert in primary and early years, and I am an expert in secondary. And everything that Cheryl's saying, I completely echo for secondary. I think what's really interesting, what you were saying about what have you learned today, and some of those strategies. Can you just explain how you might do that, or precise questions that you might ask for our teachers out there who don't normally do that? Are there any specific ways of phrasing those questions that you might be able to give us an example of?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all starts off with your learning objective. So right at the beginning of your lesson, what you would always do is tell the students what they are going to be learning. So it's really clear right from the start, and there's no vagueness about it. It's not, you're not there to provide a mystery lesson. You're there to actually tell them exactly what the learning is all about. So it's really meaningful. So what I would do is then rephrase that. So talk about the learning objective throughout the lesson. As you're teaching the lesson, keep going back to it, rephrase it if you need to. You don't always have to use exactly the same words, but always at the end of your lesson, go back to that learning objective, rephrase it. Think about asking them, okay, can somebody tell me what we have been learning today? Always throw it back out at your students. Make sure that they have been picking up on those key things that you actually want them to achieve during that lesson. It's so important that they know exactly why they are sitting in front of you and why they're listening to you. It has to be meaningful for them and actually explain to them in terms that they will understand. So if you root it in something realistic, that is going to actually enable them to actually pick up on the learning even more.
I think it's really interesting what you're saying, because I completely agree with you with regards to secondary students, and some of our Teach 2030 courses cover things like no hands up, which I think is really useful when it comes to the summary and the ends of lessons. It's a good formative assessment strategy just to make sure that everybody is on board and you are aware that you can pick on people. There are lots of different strategies for no hands up that we cover in the practical active learning course. We mention it again in the planning courses, and they're incredibly useful, which the courses at the minute are free. Part 1's completely free, part 2 is free when you use the code Teach2030, and those can be really useful. I'm just going to echo exactly what Cheryl has said for the secondary with regards to the meaningful learning, and Cheryl and I were going to talk next a little bit about what happens if your students show meaningful learning and what happens if your students are not showing meaningful learning and how we respond to that. We've actually had a lovely question really sorry if I say your name incorrectly, Memedova. We've had a lovely question about classroom management. So I think maybe we'll really quickly just discuss what do you do if effective learning is shown in the classroom and what to do if it's not shown. And then we'll get straight onto Memedova's question. So if you want to take that question, Cheryl, and then I'll maybe think about some classroom management strategies. So
Yeah,
what happens
absolutely.
if someone shows effective learning and what happens if someone doesn't? How might you respond?
Okay, so an effective learner is going to be active, is going to be trying things out, is going to be showing a lot of independence. Somebody who's not learning effectively is going to be very reliant on you as a teacher, who's going to be very, very fearful of taking taking action, to make choices, is going to be sticking to quite a rigid way of learning. And it is all about confidence. It's all about the relationship that you build up with those students, especially younger learners. You are their primary source of support, and you are their primary source of championing that student and that learner in them. And it's about allowing them to make to take these actions, to take these risks in the classroom, and showing them that it's okay. It is okay to make a mistake. Celebrate the mistakes, talk about them in a very positive way with the rest of their peers learning. So they know it's okay to explore. It is okay to do something what is technically wrong. It's fine. This is how we learn from our mistakes. And actually, if you can model making a mistake yourself, I've often done it, the children will find it hilarious, but you will really promote an atmosphere in which everything is accepted and we can all learn and share together. So that's what I would say in terms of what an active learner and a passive learner looks like.
I think it's really important what you're saying, and it's the idea of growth mindset. And then again, our Teach 2030 growth mindset course covers this an awful lot. The idea of celebrating the skill rather than just saying well done. Saying well done doesn't really do much for any learner. It's something about, I see what you're saying about this. Can you explore it and explain it a little bit more? And then you might understand where the errors come from, and you can understand sometimes errors might happen more because maybe we've not explained something exactly as we've wanted to, and it's our misconception about how we've portrayed some information. And in that sense, it's not the learner, it's maybe us. It's a way of formative assessment almost. And it's about celebrating the skill and encouraging the skills rather than just saying, well done. Absolutely. So we've had this question on classroom management, and I think it's a really fascinating area because we haven't covered this too much yet with Teach 2030. But again, I think that idea of growth mindset and celebrating the skill and celebrating the idea of doing something well in terms of the learning is quite important for that. I know that for me, classroom management, teaching secondary students can often be a touch challenging. I've taught many students who don't necessarily feel the passion for my subject, which is English. They might be more sciencey or might be more sporty, but their love of English literature might not be there. So I think for me with classroom management, it's definitely about fairness, and it's definitely about treating each student equally and remembering that the expectation for the class is there. I think the problem with classroom management is that sometimes if the behaviour isn't as we expect, we sometimes lower our expectation. And then the class don't meet that. And then we lower our expectation again, and the class don't meet that. For me, classroom management is about maintaining your high expectations and keeping them consistent. And it is about routine, I think, and I know it's the same for primary, isn't it? It's about having that rigor and routine. Every lesson, my students line up at the door. They come in, they get their books out, they write the title, they write the lesson objective in, and we do it. And if we don't do that, I send them back out again and we do it again. And with many classes, I've done that 5 or 6 times. And there is a fear as a teacher that that's a waste of time, but it isn't at all. And my head teacher has always supported me when I've done that, because the classroom needs to learn the expectation, and the expectation is high, absolutely high. But I also think it's about being clear and presenting it as choice, because if you can empower teenagers, that's very helpful, even though there is no choice. It is your choice. You can either do this activity now, or you can do this activity at lunchtime. Which would you prefer to do? That's your choice. And then suddenly they'll choose the right option. So, and it's about being consistent. If you don't get homework in one day, you can't give one student a 30-minute detention and one student an hour's detention. I think for me, it's all about consistency. What do you think, Cheryl?
I couldn't agree more. You've hit on all the exact words that I would actually use. It's about structure, routine, and high expectations. And I would say certainly with your younger learners, you may be saying the same thing 10 times, 20 times a day, because it's the first time they've actually been in a school environment, but that's what it takes. And you do feel exhausted and it is draining. But if you put the hard work in those first few weeks, it is training. That's what it is. And it's about establishing those routines. It will pay off. You will start to actually see that the children are relaxing into the routines. They are very, very clear and they are very, very secure. What I would suggest as a practical tip is with your young learners is to actually use a visual timetable. I use it and it has made such a difference in the classroom. The children know exactly what's happening at the beginning of the lesson, what the next task is, all the way through to the whole morning is structured visually. You can actually see, and the children are very secure about what's coming next. Any children who are feeling a bit insecure or a bit anxious or worried about being at school will know exactly what the steps are. Put yourself in their position. If you were going to a brand new class for an hour, you would want to know what is happening in that hour. And once you actually take away that worry for the children, they start to relax into it. They don't have so many questions or anxieties. They know when the toilet breaks are happening. They know exactly when they can go off to play, when they have to sit down on the carpet. All of that is very, very clear for them. And as Alex said, it is about having those high expectations, not letting things slip. And another tip I would say is at the beginning of your school year, you don't have to actually lay down the law. You can actually say, let's make these class rules or promises, whatever you want to call them, together. And as Alex said, the children know what the right choices are. You don't have to actually dictate it. If you do it together, you're actually building that relationship with them. They're part of making those promises. And if they're breaking those promises, well, those are the promises that they actually decided at the beginning of the year themselves. So they're not actually trying to please you. They're actually doing it for the sake of itself and for the cohesion of the group. So you're actually building so much in by using these practical tips at the beginning of the year that will actually promote relationships, behavior, all in one.
I think the only other thing that I was thinking now as well, hearing what you're saying, Cheryl, is making sure the planning's right. I think sometimes for classroom management, I've had students who have started, their attitude to learning has started dropping, but actually it's because they're finding the work too hard or too easy. And as soon as they're not challenged or challenged too much, sometimes teenagers can start then looking out the window, not quite behaving with the attitude that you want. And our planning course for Teach 2030 does cover differentiation, which I think is really important. So that and the idea that you're pitching the activity at the right level, I think that really, really helps classroom management, because all our learners are different. And sometimes we have mixed classes where somebody might be trying to achieve an A, somebody might be trying to achieve a D. Well, you can't set the same work for those two children. So those two children are going to need different activities and different outcomes. So making sure that that's catered for within your classroom. It's definitely worth having a quick look at our or a big look rather than a quick look at our differentiation section of the planning courses course. I think that's really important as well. Okay, we have no further questions, so I think it's a good time to stop. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for sharing everything with us today. You've been absolutely fantastic.
You're welcome. It's been lovely. Thank you very much, Alex.
No, not a problem at all. And remember that we're doing this next month. We're going to increase it. We're going to do 2 Q&As a month, 2 workshops a month. So please do feel free to come and join us at those. There's lots of information on our Teach2030 website. Just visit teach2030.com and you will see we're going to get a schedule of our dates out, and Cheryl does all our lovely social media, so she will get you some information out as to when we are thinking. But the next workshop is going to be Wednesday of next week at 3 p.m. and we are then going to have a live Q&A at 3 p.m. on Sunday, the 3rd of April. So we would be delighted to see you there. But thank you so much, Cheryl, for joining me today. And thank you for those who have attended. And what an excellent question in Memadova. So thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining us, and take care.
Bye.
Bye.